Hello everyone. Today we are going to study about cervical vertebra. So this is the region in an animal where these cervical vertebra are present. As we know, there are various distinctions of vertebral column. So one of the distinction, or we can say the first part of the vertebral column, is cervical vertebrae. The cervical vertebra are the part of vertebral column which forms the skeleton of neck. So this is the neck region. So the skull of the skeleton of the neck region is formed by these cervical vertebrae. In all mammals there are 7 cervical vertebrae. There are many mammals in the world, and all among all mostly the mammals have 7 cervical vertebrae. How much? 7. Now, can you tell me, are there organisms which have more than 7 or less than 7, or variation from 7? Yes, there are organisms like poultry, like we can say fowl. In fowl, we can say there are 14 cervical vertebrae, not 7, but 14. The first and second cervical vertebra are atlas and axis, which are atypical. Now, there are 7 cervical vertebrae. Among these 7 cervical vertebrae, two vertebrae are made in such a way that they lack this journal body feature, that they don't have body neural arc and processes. They have a different structure from these three things, so that's why they are known as atypical. Transverse processes of C3, C4, C5, C6 is bifid. Now, what is the meaning of this bifid? It is saying that transverse processes. But what was this transverse processes? If this is a body, then these are the transverse processes. Okay. So here you can see bifid. There are two. So these are bifid transverse processes. You can see it is a bone, and in this bone there are bifid transverse processes. So C3, C4, C5, and C6 have bifid transverse processes. The foramen transverse cerium is present in most animals, and it increases in diameter caudally. What is this foramen transverse cerium? We will study in the atlas bone, also in the case of horse. Let me tell you, foramen transverse cerium is a type of foramen which is present generally posteriorly or caudally, and its diameter also increases caudally. So the maximum diameter of this foramen transverse cerium is in C6 cervical vertebra, and it is absent, this foramen transverse cerium is absent in C7. Okay. Now there are certain organisms which have variation from this 7 cervical vertebra. Like in case of sloth, we have 6 cervical vertebra. In great anteaters, we have 8 to 9 cervical vertebra, and in fowl, we have 14 cervical vertebrae. Now let me come to the first cervical vertebra, that is atlas. So atlas is the first cervical vertebra, or it is known as C1. Okay. Now this is a dorsal surface of atlas. Now what is the dorsal surface? It is towards the head, or towards the junction of the body. It is towards the junction of the body, this portion. So what is this, what is this, what is this? I will tell you all in the upcoming, but let me tell you in this also. This projection, this, or it is a rudimentary structure of dorsal spinous process, we can say that. So it is also known as dorsal tubercle. This is dorsal tubercle. Now what are these are foramen transverse cerium. What are these structures? These are foramen transverse cerium. This part is the neural ring. What is this? Neural ring. And this part is the, what is this? This is wings. These are the wings, and these are neural rings, and this is tubercle. Same is the ventral surface, like towards the tail region. This is the ventral tubercle. These are the depressions. These are the depressions which are known as fossa atlantis, and this is the neural ring. Also the posterior surface, like towards the tail, we can see this is ventral tubercle, this is dorsal tubercle. Okay. This is a type of notch here, groove here. There you can find some differences, we will study in the lower part of this chapter. And this is vertebral foramen. Similarly, anterior surface, this is the anterior surface of the neural ring. So these are the structures I told you, like this is the dorsal tubercle. Now, one thing I will tell you here and in the later section also, that to this anterior section axis bone gets joined via fossa odontis process. Not fossa odontis, but odontoid process. Okay, odontoid process. And to this posterior surface, what get joined? If this would be the posterior surface, then our condyles will get joined here, head condyles. Okay. Now let me get in detail to the atlas bone. It is the first cervical vertebra. C1. Atlas is the first cervical vertebra as it carries the round head in human. As atlas bone carries the round head in human, so it has got the name atlas. Why atlas? Why the first cervical vertebra is now atlas? Because it carries the whole weight of head. It differ from rest of the cervical vertebra in not possessing general characters, so it is atypical. As I told you, it do not have a proper body, a neural arc, and all the processes. That's why it is atypical in nature, and it deviates from the general characters. What atlas bone has, we will study it also. Atlas bone comprises of a large neural ring and two wings. So what atlas bone comprises? Atlas bone comprises two things: wings and neural ring. Okay, wings and neural ring. This is the wing region, this is the wing region, and this is the neural ring region. And this central foramen is known as vertebral foramen, through which spinal cord passes. Okay, in atlas vertebra, the body is in the form of a thick plate and is present on the ventral wall of the neural ring. What it is telling us, that in this atlas bone, the body is present in ventral region in the form of a thick plate. This is the thick plate in the ventral region. Okay, this forms the floor of the neural ring. Okay, floor of the neural ring in case of atlas bone. Like you can see, there are various structures of neural this atlas bone. This is the neural ring here. This is the articular surfaces, caudal articular surfaces, through which the odontoid process get joined. This is the dorsal tubercle. You can see this is the dorsal tubercle, this is the ventral tubercle. Very important point to note here, this is the anterior portion of the cervical C1 cervical vertebra first atlas, where you can see these are some foramens, four foramens. Okay, this foramen which goes inside to the vertebral foramen is known as intervertebral foramen, and this foramen which goes outside to the vertebral foramen into a depression, this depression is known as fossa odontis. So LR foramen is that foramen which opens into fossa odontis, and intervertebral foramen is such a foramen which opens into vertebral foramen. And this foramen which is present towards the posterior surface is known as what? Is known as foramen transversarium. Foramen transversarium, like you can see here. This is foramen transversarium. This is fossa atlantis. Okay, fossa atlantis, where LR foramen opens, and this is the nutrient foramen, which through which vessels passes and provide nutrients to the bone tissues. Okay, this is wing region. Now, what are the part of atlas bone? Let me tell you about this. There are two parts of atlas bone. The first one is neural ring, and second one is wings. Neural ring and wings. Wings are bony plates projected from either sides of the neural ring. If this would be the neural ring, so these wings are the processes which originates from the either side of the neural ring. These are the wings which originates from either sides of the neural ring. Ring encloses large vertebral foramen for the passage of spinal cord. So this is the ring portion which is enclosing this vertebral foramen for the passage of spinal cord. So spinal cord passes through this vertebral foramen. Neural ring possess two lateral masses connected by dorsal and ventral arc. So this is the neural ring. It possesses two lateral masses. This is first lateral mass, this is second lateral mass, and these lateral masses are connected by this dorsal neural ring or ventral neural arc or ventral neural ring. Okay, not ring but arc. Now the dorsal surface has dorsal tubercle as I showed in the diagram, and ventral surface is ventral tubercle. Now what this dorsal tubercle does, it represents the dorsal spinous process as I mentioned in the diagram also, and this ventral tubercle gives attachment to ventral straight muscles of neck. There are certain muscles in the neck. This ventral tubercle give attachment to these muscles. Now dorsal arc is perforated on either sides near its anterior border by two pair of openings. This is the anterior surface of the dorsal side. This is the opening of certain foramens in the dorsal arc, but on the anterior side, on the head region, towards the head region. It is present on the dorsal side but towards the head region. There are two foramens. The first one is intervertebral foramen, second is alar foramen. Now intervertebral foramen is that foramen which opens into vertebral foramen. So it is the anterior internal opening. Why anterior? Because it is present in dorsal as well as anterior side. This is the anterior side, this is the posterior side, and this is the dorsal surface. Okay, and this lower one is the ventral surface. Like you can see, here is dorsal tubercle and here it is ventral tubercle. So intervertebral foramen is such a foramen which opens into this vertebral foramen. Okay, it gives passage to first pair of the spinal nerve. So first pair of spinal nerve are passed via these foramens which are known as intervertebral foramen. Intervertebral foramen give passage to the first pair of spinal nerves and muscular branches of vertebral artery. Now the other foramen which we have to study is alar foramen. It is the anterior external. This is the anterior portion of the foramen which opens into fossa atlantis, which was this region, fossa atlantis. It opens into fossa atlantis, which opens into fossa atlantis, alar foramen. So it is present in the anterior region and it opens exteriorly. So it is known as anterior external. What? Anterior external opening which opens into the ventral surface of wing in a depression fossa atlantis, as I told in the diagram also. It gives passage for ventral branch of first spinal nerve. The ventral branch of first spinal nerve originate or passes from this region, ventral branches. And the first pair of spinal nerves also originate from intervertebral foramen. Both these openings are connected by a alar groove. If I will zoom here in, you can see this is the one foramen, this is the second foramen, and here is bone. This bone is known as alar groove. What? Alar groove. The floor of vertebral foramen possess smooth articular area on the posterior side known as fovea dentis. What it means? It says let me come to the diagram. This is the ventral surface of this is the posterior surface of the neural ring. In this posterior surface on the floor, this is the floor of the vertebral foramen. This floor is smooth, and this smooth floor give attachment to the axis bone via odontoid process, and this smooth surface is known as fossa dentis. What it is known as? Fovea dentis. Fovea dentis articulates with odontoid process. Like this is the odontoid process of axis bone, and this was the fovea dentis on the floor of vertebral foramen in the posterior region. Okay, so this odontoid process gets joined with this fovea dentis by forming a synovial joint. On the floor of vertebral foramen, there is a rough plate also. There is a rough place of at anterior portion for the attachment of odontoid ligament. Now you can see these are the articular surfaces. These are caudal articular surfaces through which ligaments originates, which are known as odontoid ligaments. Now the neural ring on its anterior surface possesses deep articular cavity for occipital condyle. Now what it is saying? It is saying that there are certain surfaces on the posterior region. On which region? Sorry, anterior region. This is the anterior region, and in this anterior region there are occipital condyles which get joined. I think I told you wrong at the starting. This was the posterior region, this is the anterior region. So let me clear that occipital condyles get joined to this anterior surface. This is the anterior surface of neural ring, and in this anterior surface occipital condyles get joined. So where occipital condyles get joined? To the anterior surface of the atlas bone. And these occipital condyles have four articular surfaces. Like you can see dorsal, three dorsal parts, ventral parts, and non-articular areas. Okay. Let me show you that. There, if we will turn it out, there is a one dorsal region through which this occipital condyles get joined, and this is the ventral portion, and this triangular portion is non-articular, which do not get joined with any of the bone. Okay. Now let me come to the next part. Medially, the articular cavities of both the sides are separated by grooves on ventral side and by notch on the dorsal side. So this is the, you can see this is the neural ring, and it is saying that medially, that means in this region, in the middle of this ring, it is separated. This bone, this neural ring is separated by grooves on ventral side. This is the ventral side, so it here we can see the grooves, and notch on the dorsal side. This is the notch on the dorsal side. On the posterior side of the ring present two smooth articular surfaces on lateral side for the articulation with anterior surface of axis. What it is saying? It is saying that on the posterior side of the ring, this was the posterior side of the ring. This is the posterior side of the ring. Here two smooth articular surfaces are present on the lateral side. You can see these are the lateral surfaces which are smooth for the attachment with the axis bone. Okay. Now let me come to the wings. Wings represent transverse process of other vertebra. Wings represent transverse process of other vertebra. That means if we will talk about other vertebrae, their transverse process are present in them. And if we will talk about the transverse process in atlas bone, that would be wings. And these arise from lateral mass and they are mostly horizontal. But when we come to the species difference, we will see that horse has downwards and outwards wings. Okay. Edges are rough for muscle attachment. You can see these are the edges of wings. These are rough for the muscle attachment. Ventral surface possess depression fossa atlantis. This is the fossa atlantis. This is the wing region, and it has a depression in its ventral surface which is known as fossa atlantis, in which LR foramen also opens up. LR foramens open into fossa atlantis. Now let me come to the important point, that is the species difference. Let me tell you first about horse. So what are the differences in horse? So wings of horse, wings in the atlas of horse slope downwards and outwards. So it is not horizontal, it slopes downwards and outwards, downwards and outward. You can see downwards and outwards. Besides LR foramen, sorry, it is written LR, let me clear it. Besides LR foramen, besides LR and intervertebral foramen, there is another foramen transversarium. This is the foramen transversarium on the posterior side. Okay, it is present in the posterior side on the edges. Okay, on the borders of the edges. So in horse, foramen transversarium is also present, but foramen transversarium is not present in the, in what? In ox, in the atlas of ox. Posterior articular surface is saddle shaped. This is the posterior articular surface and it is saddle shaped. It is some sort of this kind of a saddle shaped. But in case of ox, we saw that posterior articular surface was simple, it was flat. Now let me come to the difference in dog. Ventral arc is narrower and possess small tubercle posteriorly. So this is the ventral tubercle. You can see the ventral tubercle is so much narrow, it is sharp, and it has this ventral tubercle which is directed backwards. Okay. Also it is very small. Dorsal surface is strongly convex. You can see this is the dorsal surface which is strongly convex. But in case of other animals, you cannot see this this particular convexity in such a manner. Like here, you cannot see the convexity proper, but here you can see this convexity on the dorsal surface. Now, foramen transverse cerium is also present here, and wings are horizontal. They are not like in case of horse. Instead of LR foramen, they have LR notch. They don't have this LR foramen which opens into the fossa atlantis. They have this LR notch. This is the LR notch. Now let me come to the pig atlas. Atlas has large dorsal tuberosity. You can see it is the dorsal region and it is very big in shape. So it is a large dorsal tuberosity. Wings are flat and possess posterior tuberosity. These are wings are flat and they possess posterior tuberosity. That means posteriorly they are thick. Okay. Ventral tubercle is long, compressed, and projects downwards. This is the ventral tubercle which is projected downwards and it is sharp kind of a thing. It is compressed. Foramen transverse cerium absent. If present, posterior on the body. That it is saying that if there would be foramen transverse cerium, it would be present on the posterior surface. Okay, this region, edges. Now there are extra points which we have to remember, that the vertebral foramen has two parts, one broader part and one narrow part. One broader part is for the spinal cord passage, and this small part is for the attachment of odontoid process of axis bone. So we can easily see if there would be a pig atlas bone by seeing these two distinctions in the vertebral foramen. Now let me come to the fowl. The most important thing we have to remember is that atlas of fowl is ring shaped. Atlas of fowl is, you can see it is a ring shaped. Ventral arc possesses concave articular surfaces. This is the ventral arc and it possesses the concave articular surface. You can see it is a concave articular surfaces anteriorly. This is the anterior region. Anteriorly they are concave in shape for the attachment of single occipital condyle. There would be a single occipital condyle, no two. Like in humans we have two condyles. This was all about